Hi, this is Dr. Michelle Robin with Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience. And I believe if you'll change one thing a month, one thing for the next 12 months, you'll change your life forever. Thanks for joining me on the journey. Well, good afternoon and welcome to Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience. I'm not sure about you, but have you realized that we are about 120 days left in 2020, the year that would never end, or as some would say, has been many, many years in 1 year. And today's guest is going to help us shed some light on some ways that we could gain some awareness and help ourselves. So today's guest is Blake D. Bauer. He's the author of the international best-selling book, You Were Not Born to Suffer. And so some of us feel like we're suffering right now. So I thought this was a timely episode. Each year, he helps thousands of people who cannot find effective support from conventional psychology, medicine, or religion. Blake is a world-renowned teacher and speaker with an extensive background in psychology, alternative medicine, nutrition, traditional healing, and mindful meditation. Based on his personal experience overcoming deep suffering, addiction, and adversity, as well as his professional success with over 1,000 people worldwide, Blake's pioneering work integrates what he has found to be the most effective approach to optimal mental, emotional, and physical health. So he's a perfect guest for Small Changes, Big Shifts. Blake, welcome to my show.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's an introduction into totally transparent. I know absolutely zero about you. I know more about you now in that last 30 seconds. My team, great job vetting guests for the show. So I wanted to give a shout out to my team for all their wonderful work. So Blake, tell me about your suffering. Kind of go into a little bit of your story. I don't need, not 20 minutes, but just about 5 minutes, high level of Blake's story.
Absolutely. So I, grew up in a family like a lot of families that was very dysfunctional and unconscious. And so I experienced a lot of, mental and emotional pain growing up that I was not aware of and didn't understand or know how to talk about. And then as a young man, I got heavily into drugs and alcohol and started to abuse all kinds of substances very extremely, to the point where by the time I was 18, I had been arrested a number of times for drug possession. I was also a top athlete and played football, American football, and was supposed to play college football, was a captain of the varsity football team with my two best friends. And I got a very bad DUI on a number of pharmaceutical pills, alcohol, and cannabis, got arrested. My coach found out and kicked me off the team, and I lost all my offers to play in university. So this was at 17 going on 18. And so at that time, those activities and those aspects of my life represented my identity, my ego, and everything to me. And I very effectively sabotaged and ruined it all. And so I went through my first major death of self at the age of 17 going on 18, where my entire identity and psychological structure and belief system just crumbled. And what was underneath a very reckless, arrogant, and invincible young man was a very insecure, tortured, anxious soul that was very lost and confused. And so at the age of 18, I also had all that pressure of, what am I going to do with my life? Am I going to go to school? Am I going to study? What am I going to study? Am I going to go to work? Is life just about making money? Is success equal happiness? Does success equal, making a lot of money? And does that equal happiness? So I started asking all of these, very intense, important existential questions at a very young age. And then basically from 18 moving forward, all I wanted to do was answer the two questions. How do I heal myself and free myself from this suffering? Because I was waking up every day tortured psychologically and emotionally to the point where I was suicidally depressed for a long period. And then also I struggled so much because I felt paralysis, not only from my mental and emotional suffering, but it was very much tied up with having no idea who I was or what I was supposed to do with my life. So that journey led me to 5 different universities where I studied psychology, nutrition, and then went on to study traditional Chinese medicine, so acupuncture and oriental herbal medicine. I read hundreds, probably thousands of books on religion and God and spirituality and health and quantum physics, and all the books that I think we all read on our path towards understanding life, reality, the nature of the universe, and ourselves ultimately. And then I had the blessing of seeking out and finding spiritual masters on topics like meditation, yoga, tai chi, qigong, and as a young man, basically devoted my entire life, every day, all day, to these pursuits in everything that I did for study and in everything that I did for work to make some money and to pay my bills. And this is obviously the super abridged version, but eventually I came to some clarity from my seeking, my desperate seeking. And that clarity surrounded me realizing that all I was really doing in my educational, spiritual, personal development journey was really, I was just learning how to love myself and looking for love. And I was looking for the love I never got as a child. I was looking for the love I didn't get from my parents. I was looking for the love that I didn't realize was infinite inside of me. And like most people, I had learned to look for love in the form of approval, attention, acceptance, security, etc., outside of myself through pleasing other people or making myself pleasing to other people at my own detriment, all in this quest, this search for love. And I realized that my entire healing journey and my spiritual or process of awakening was really me just learning what it meant to relate to myself with love and kindness and acceptance on a daily basis. And then I realized that everybody was actually doing the same thing, and that we were all suffering from not knowing how to value ourselves 100% in the present, which goes back to us never learning how to love and value ourselves 100% as children, because mom and dad didn't know how, and the school system didn't know how, and our religious bringing didn't know how. And so we're all making ourselves basically sick, and we don't realize it because we've never learned how to actually treat ourselves well. And so I wanted to share that, Michelle, with as many people as I could. And I was young and naive. And I'm like, I thought to myself, how can I do that? And I thought, oh, I'll write a book. And I had no idea what that process entailed. And I was rejected by over 100 agents and publishers because I was 24, 25, 26. Nobody took me seriously. I ended up getting a very big contract with one of the biggest spiritual publishers or personal development publishers in the world, only to get dropped and screwed over by them. And then I decided to self-publish my first book, which became a bestseller as a self-published book. And then a publisher in London came after me and bought it. And then now it's an international bestseller in 10 languages, all outlining the root causes of suffering, depression, disease, in terms of how we've never learned how to love ourselves and value ourselves on a mental and emotional level, very deeply, clearly, and practically. So
And
that's
you're talking about you were not born to suffer. That's the book that's an international bestseller.
yes,
So on this show, we like to celebrate, guide, connect, which provide hope. Celebrate, guide, connect, which provide hope. So we're celebrating you for having the courage to do the work. And not only did you do the work so that you could possibly, I'm not sure if you're a parent, become a better parent, a better community citizen.
yeah,
And you're taking that and you're spreading that hope around the world. I want to tell you, every day I talk to somebody who's battling depression, anxiety, and a lot of young people. So I can really sympathize with where you were at and the need for your work. So thank you. I'm celebrating you and the work you're doing. I want to
thank you so much.
I want to talk about suffering. I agree with you, and I've been doing this show 7 years, and I agree with you that people suffer when they're disconnected from themselves. And when we've done a lot of work with people around the Hoffman process and different things like that help people kind of clean out their cupboards here. And we're not throwing parents under the bus. I mean, if you're a parent listening to this right now, you know what? When you know better, you do better. And at some point, the only person to be mad at is the creator of the universe. So how do we take a step forward to break the cycle? I call it make generational change through whole person health. That's my personal mission. How do I help 5 to 30-year-olds make generational change through whole person health? So you're a perfect candidate for today's show. So what does suffering maybe look like in your mind's eye after you've experienced this?
Well, I think it manifests in so many different forms, obviously. The most gross, manifestation, and I'm sure you've seen this in your practice for many years, is physical disease. So, having cancer, autoimmune disease, something very severe that really influences your quality of life, your ability to move freely through the world, and then your mental attitude about whether you should be hopeful or pessimistic about what the future holds for you. And that's typically the most, extreme manifestation of the buildup of this inner pain, this inner toxicity, and lack of understanding how to really take care of ourselves. So it can be a physical illness. Addiction is another major symptom. So drug, alcohol addiction, food addiction, if you've got problems with, overeating or anorexia, for example, or bulimia, those are symptoms. Drinking a lot of alcohol, smoking a lot of cigarettes, smoking a lot of cannabis. And all of these are really coping mechanisms that we learn throughout our life to repress and numb out, typically, from emotions that we don't know how to talk about or deal with or process in a healthy way. But then suffering can be very subtle, where you just wake up in the morning and your thoughts are all over the place and you don't feel clear. You feel anxious, you feel stressed, you feel confused, or you feel panicked. Like, you wake up and you don't necessarily feel this trust that the day is going to be good or things are going to go your way. And so there's panic, which I think a lot of people have been facing, over the last 6 months, in particular, with what we've all experienced, what's going to happen with my job, what's going to happen with my health and the people I care about, their health, what's going to happen in the world. As you were mentioning about, people who have children, what kind of place are my kids going to grow up in? I know that's something I've heard out of my mother's mouth a few times, how I'm worried for you guys that you're going to have a world that goes through things like this, because it's so unprecedented. So, really, if you're not at peace and you're not enjoying your day right now, your life right now, your relationships right now, you are suffering in some way. And that suffering is, the result of not knowing how to take really good care of yourself so that your life in the present feels good to you. Your experience of your life in the present, however that manifests externally, it should, and ideally we want it to feel good to us. And so, I'm sure throughout our conversation, we're going to talk about the keys to how do I create this reality and this inner experience of my body and my mind and my heart that feels good to me on a daily basis. It's really practical.
I feel called to also throw in that lump of addictions, like you said, food, self-harm, alcohol, drugs, since marijuana or CBDs become legal, maybe a lot of teenagers using it more. But I want to also throw in there pornography and sexual addiction, because that is really rampant. And that's another way people numb out, maybe numb out playing video games. And I have to tell you,
Absolutely.
I'm with your mother. I'm super concerned. I'm super concerned for our kids. And that's why I do this show and why I do the work I do. So once again, we're celebrating you today. And I want to give a shout out to my partner, Advent Health, who's a national healthcare company that's also interested in mind, body, spirit medicine. So thank you for sharing this journey with us. So let's use, you mentioned keys and self-love. I know for me, I was suffering as well. And by the way, if you look up the word patient, it means one who suffers.
No, I did not know that.
Patient means one who suffers. So how do we help people not suffer? And one way we don't suffer is we live in the present. And I was suffering, and I still suffer some now. I instead of suffering for weeks and months, I suffer for short periods of time. And I'm like, you know what? You can change this if you want to. And I want to hear your keys. How did you shift? We have a similar background. My background's in Chinese medicine and chiropractic. My favorite thing is spirituality and emotional well-being. Hence why my shows are more about that versus the chemistry. So what are some of the keys that you share with people?
So there's 4 that I really have distilled things down to. And again, it comes selfishly from my own desire to be as well as possible. And then it grew into, well, how do I share these with other people? Because I feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there, or there's a lot of excess information out there. And so it can be hard to sift through the theory and get to what really works on a daily basis. So I like to focus on what it worked for me and what I've now seen work for over 100,000 people. So the first one is developing this emotional awareness, this emotional intelligence, like we've discussed, because in every moment of every day and every situation that we find ourselves every day, we are feeling something. We typically need something or we want something, but we never learned how to articulate this. So a lot of us might be sitting here feeling anxious, but we don't know how to say, I feel anxious. And we might feel overwhelmed and we don't know how to say, I need some space for myself. We never learned how to articulate ourselves clearly. And then often on top of that is the layer of fear and insecurity about if we do express what we're feeling, we are concerned about the reactions of the people around us. And that is a habit that is developed very young when we're little to survive at home. We're afraid of upsetting mom and dad or our caretakers or teachers at school. And a lot of times we're not even aware of it because it can be very gross or it can be extremely subtle, where we're not scared of our parents because they're angry and react aggressively, but we're scared of disappointing them because we actually love them so much and we care about them so much. So there's this whole spectrum by which we keep things in. So there's a lack of education around it, the lack of practice, and then there's all the fears that stop us from expressing it. So that's the first one, is to learn that we have to be open and honest and vulnerable in every situation every day, and stop turning this energy, this emotion in on itself and clogging up our system, clogging up our energy system, clogging up our circulatory system, so that everything that's meant to come out comes out, instead of clogging up the system like a toilet that needs to be plunged, because things are going the wrong way. And the second part of that, which I think is misunderstood and not focused on enough, is doing it kindly, because we have a lot of unhealthy examples of communication that we experience. A lot of us, grew up around people who, if they weren't being heard, they would scream. And so we think that getting louder is how you get heard, or we attack and try and hurt the other person because we're hurting. And that never helps us to be understood. And it never communicates our feelings, needs, and desires clearly. It only pushes people away and causes further problems in our relationship. And so the key is to say what you feel, but then you have to learn to say it kindly and gracefully. And that's like a secret sauce, because, Michelle, if I can say to you, I feel really hurt by what you just said, instead of F you, you're such a bitch, you are so selfish. As soon as I get hurt and angry and I don't say it in a healthy way, and I start to attack you and say you this and you that, your ego and defenses are going to come up, and you're going to defend yourself. Even if you said something hurtful, deep down you believe you're a good person, so you're going to defend yourself to the death no matter what. Even if you didn't respond the best, you're still going to protect yourself. And so the lack of kindness and grace in our communication, I think, is probably one of the single root causes of most of our problems in life. So learning to pause and find kinder words is really important. So that's my first key, is honesty and kindness. The second one is acting in integrity, because a lot of us feel something, but then we do something different. And it's the same habits that keep us stuck. We're afraid that we might fail, or we're afraid of being judged, or we're afraid of what other people are going to say or think. If we actually follow our heart, we actually act in integrity based on what we feel and need and want. And both of those keys, acting in integrity and expressing ourselves honestly and kindly, one of the core dynamics that I've seen in myself and in other people is this root cause of self-doubt. And I'm sure you know it in yourself and see it in people. And for me, it was really important for me to understand, where does self-doubt really come from? And I think if, Michelle, if you look back on your life, and then if we ask everybody who's listening to look back on their life, and if you really reflect, how have I treated myself throughout my life? Have I been kind to myself? Have I been true to myself? Have I been loving to myself over all these years? And for most people, their answer will be like, maybe not really. And so what you start to see when you start to break this down is a relationship to ourselves where we've been very critical, we've been very mean, we've been very judgmental, we've been very destructive. And when you look at it in that way, it actually makes sense why we don't trust ourselves. And self-doubt is the manifestation. Because if, Michelle, for example, if I was your brother and I had been betraying you and mistreating you for 40 years, you're not going to really like me or trust me if I'm horrible to you. And that's how our relationship to ourselves is when we've been betraying ourselves and hurting ourselves and mistreating ourselves for decades. Of course, we're going to doubt ourselves when we start to open up and be honest. Of course, we're going to doubt ourselves when we start to follow our heart and we realize, I can't stay in this job anymore, or I can't stay in this marriage anymore, or I need something different for myself. Of course, self-doubt is going to pop up to keep you safe and in your comfort zone because you don't trust yourself. And you've been living in this way for so many years that you don't even know what life being true to yourself and taking really good care of yourself looks like or feels like. But meanwhile, the frustration and the suffering is building to the point where you know you need to do something because you can't keep doing what you've been doing. So um, those are the first two primary ones that I think are, really important. I don't know if you want me to keep going with the last two, or if you want to dive into something else.
Well, it's funny. I'm hearing these words. I'm a little bit of a word nerd. I'm hearing the word "when in doubt, shout it out." When I say that, what do you think about that?
I think absolutely it's better out than in, but try and be kind. That old axiom, like, treat others how you want to be treated. Because for me, in my relationships, I have a very sensitive heart, which I've learned to embrace as a man. And I didn't always. I always, I protected it in different ways. But for me, what I'm aware of, and I think this is true for all of us, is that when someone in my life that I care a lot about and I love, whether it's a family member or a partner, mindlessly talks to me in a way that's hurtful and insensitive, I lose trust in them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a betrayal, because if you give your heart to someone, you open your heart, that vulnerability, to your family, to your friends, to an intimate partner, and you're giving them your heart, you're letting them in, you're risking, right, all those defenses, you're letting them in. And I think that is something that's sacred, and that we should take care of each other's heart. And none of this means we're bad people. We just never learned how to take care of each other's hearts because we never learned how to take care of our heart. And so, Michelle, if you were to let me in as a friend or a lover, and I say something to try and hurt you because I'm hurting, you're going to lose trust in me. You're not going to feel secure with me anymore. I will kind of ruin that between us on a level. Can it be mended? Yes. Can you cultivate it back up? Yes. But I believe it really is like a faucet, and we should think in terms of, it's a faucet. Like, once you let that out, you can't take it back. So yes, I think it's good to get it out, but I
Maybe
think you
write it out. When in doubt, write it out. Maybe when in doubt, write it out.
write it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah. I don't want to make it. I agree with you. I don't think we should be attacking, and kindness is my number one value. I just did a quote on kindness, and some people think because I'm kind, I'm not. I don't have boundaries, and I've had to work on boundaries because I didn't have my first 30 years of life. So
Yes.
I appreciate you talked about with kindness. When we think about the level of depression and anxiety, I was with one of my friends, a phenomenal psychiatrist, and we were going for a walk, and we talked about the mental health crisis we were in before COVID. And we've got the pandemic, and then we've got Black Lives Matter, and then the mental health pandemic that we're on the forefront of. If I was a parent and I have a child who's suffering with alcoholism or uh, just this depression, anxiety, what would be the top three things you would say in this moment to do? Because there's somebody dialing in right now that we're going to really help them. I know you shared some different keys, but what could they do in this moment with their child?
So I think one of the best steps I think you can take is maybe open up and be vulnerable yourself with your child. So, for example, instead of coming from the position of, I need to fix this or rescue them, what if you were to just show your vulnerable humanity to them as a way of setting an example for them to feel safe so they can open up to you? So if maybe you were to go to your son or your daughter and share, um, I haven't really been able to talk to your dad or your mom about this or anybody about this, but like, I've really been struggling with X, Y, and Z. I personally have had thoughts come up like this. I've personally had things come up. And I think the child will feel, your teenager or whatever age they are going to feel less defensive because you're not making it about them, you're making it about yourself. And you're really setting an example of how do I share my deepest, darkest parts of myself with somebody that are hard to talk about? Because that's really one of the main things they need to do to heal. But sometimes they don't feel safe if you just say, what's wrong? Or can you explain it to me? And they don't even probably know how, or they don't feel safe because they've felt that you've betrayed them in the past or taken advantage of their vulnerability. And these are things that kids go through with their parents. And if you reflect back on what you felt with your parents, you would have had all of these dynamics, surfacing in you too back, during that period. So I think that's a really good one is setting the example in terms of you being vulnerable first. It's like, the saying, seek first to understand and then to be understood. It's kind of like it's like reverse psychology. So you do care. You want to know what they're going through. So you can ask them, what are you going through? But sometimes they might not open up right away. But if you set the tone and say, I really wanted to talk to you. I wanted to share what I was going through. I'm worried about you, but that's really because this is what I'm going through. So I think that that's really helpful. And then the opposite side of that too, I think is also helpful. Just asking them, what are you feeling? What do you need? What do you want, to help them learn to articulate those answers to those questions? But I think starting with yourself as the example is even more effective.
I want
And
to talk
then,
there for
go ahead.
just a second.
Yeah.
You were talking about feeling. I was with one of my friends, fellow Hoffman graduate, Natalie, yesterday, and she said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Great, great." She goes, "Oh, give me a feeling word." Great's not a feeling word. And so I said, "I'm feeling encouraged, and I'm also feeling concerned." And so I'll ask my team to put in the show notes. We have a document that has different feelings on it. And I think that'd be a great way for our listeners to start to say, okay, what really is a feeling? I'm not sure we're taught besides good and great and bad, instead of, what, I'm feeling disappointed, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling uncertain. So how can we share that? I really appreciate that perspective from you.
Thanks, Michelle. I got one more that popped into my head that I think is good, is that because a lot of people are not going to school and can't do the social activities or extracurricular activities that they're used to, one thing that I've really found benefit from, and I've encouraged everybody to do, and I'm sure you have, because it's a very natural, logical thing to do, is to get outside and to exercise. So I think if you can just be skillful and keep it simple and say to your son or your daughter, hey, want to go for a walk? Or, hey, I heard about this really cool hike, that's a half hour away or an hour away. So let's go hike for a couple hours. And then that quality time out in nature, exercising, moving your blood, moving your energy, moving your emotions, then could also open up to a very deep conversation at the same time. So you can water two trees with one hose, if you will, by taking that approach. Yeah, I've never loved kill two birds with one stone. I like water two trees with one hose.
Well, it's funny. I changed it too. I put catch two butterflies with one net.
Okay, there you go.
Water two trees with. Motion is lotion, and you segued into a perfect next question for me. I think so many times, like, I want to tell you, if I saw 10 new patients this week, 7 or 8 of them their top 3 complaints are going to be anxiety, depression. Yes, I'm a chiropractor. I see the obvious things, pain and autoimmune, but really a lot of it is, anxiety and depression, especially with my younger population. And so we're thinking about tools, and we're thinking about whole person health. And you mentioned exercise. What else have you found beneficial for your brain and your emotional well-being that's not the psycho spiritual babble?
You mean in terms of exercise, or
maybe in terms of chemistry or energy, sleep, things like that?
Yes, sleep is absolutely important. Diet is absolutely important. For people who aren't familiar with it, the food we eat holds a vibration. And for example, fresh fruit and vegetables are full of enzymes that are full of life, vibrating with energy. So when you eat them, they give you a lot of energy. Whereas when you eat if you eat processed food, or if you eat fried food, or if you eat too much, bread and pasta, there's not a lot of energy in those foods. So they bring you down. They make you tired. They don't give you that vitality. Um, so food is definitely very important. And then the ironic relationship though is that if your feelings don't matter to you, so if you don't know how to express your feelings, deep down you have this subconscious belief that you don't matter. That's kind of the narrative of your life. I don't matter, because if you did matter, you would express what you feel and want and need every day. But if you live with this narrative that I don't really matter and that everybody else matters more, or everybody else is more important, and thus I have to please and do for others, or just keep quiet to keep the peace or to avoid confrontation, I have found that a heart that feels it doesn't matter becomes a body that doesn't feel worthy of loving care and attention. So that's why it's so hard for so many people to eat right and exercise regularly and then keep off weight if they put on weight, because the root is the feeling that I don't matter, which goes back to not knowing how to say my feelings, needs, and desires matter. Because when your feelings, needs, and desires matter, you are so in tune with your body in the present moment that when you eat a fried chicken wing or you eat McDonald's and it gives you indigestion and you don't really feel that great and you can't focus on anything else, then you have your next realization is, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't like how this makes me feel and I like feeling good. So I'm going to eat the right thing. I'm going to, exercise to make myself feel better. I'm only going to spend time with people who I feel good around, that don't bring me down. And so it really blossoms and ripples into everything that we do on a daily basis. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, self-love is, what do they say, that the gap between where you are and self-love is self-care. And how do you really have that? And I've learned years ago that I could talk to my clients about drinking water and eating vegetables and eating foods that nourish them. However, unless they start to really love themselves, it's short term. And this
Right.
is a long-term journey. This is not just, you change your life today and then here you are forever. That's why it's called small changes, big shifts. And you've got to build some rhythm to have resilience through that. So you've shared a lot of wisdom with us. And those of you that are live with us today on Facebook, if you have questions, this is a great time for you to post them in the comments. And I'll be happy to share them with Blake. Blake, we talk about celebrate, guide, connect. Celebrate, guide, connect. What's the best way for our listeners to find you?
My website is unconditional-selflove.com. And then my book, You Were Not Born to Suffer, on Amazon is probably the best resource because it's very thorough.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to encourage all of you, if you have children suffering or you're suffering, and we all know somebody's suffering. Okay. Without a doubt, I could say that a blanket statement. And I'm usually I'm not 100% sure of anything, but today's times, and even before today's times, I was sure that we all know somebody who's suffering, or you have a child suffering, or you're suffering, and you could be 60, 70, 80 years old and maybe looking at struggles with maybe forgiving somebody. And you talk about forgiveness as well. What are some of the keys to forgiveness?
Well, there are two primary ways to approach forgiveness. So the first one, which is relatively straightforward, is I would encourage everybody to write letters to anybody that's hurt you, and think in terms of, you're not going to give the person the letter, at least this first draft. So if you have a father or a mother or an ex or somebody or a sibling or a friend that's really broken your heart, whether they're alive or they've already passed, write a letter saying, Dear mom, dear dad, dear ex-boyfriend, girlfriend, dear your brother or sister, and say everything you've never said to them. I would just say, get it out and don't filter it. This, you can be as mean and curse as much as you want, because this is just for you to basically get the toxicity and the darkness out of your heart and out of your body. And I would do every major person in your life that you still hold hurt or anger or hatred towards, just to get it out. And then if they're still alive and you really feel like it's time for you to be honest with them, I would write a second draft that's much more clear about, I felt hurt because I needed this when I was growing up, and I felt like you couldn't give me that, but I now realize that you didn't know how to give it to yourself, and you couldn't give it to me. So you write a much more politically correct, but just a kind, mindful, but honest. There's that middle way where you're not sugarcoating anything, but you're also not being abusive. Because if you are abusive, that was the other part of just expressing yourself kindly that we were talking about before, is when you're abusive, if you're mean, then the result of that is that you feel guilty and you feel shame. And so then you're creating more problems for yourself when you express yourself in a toxic way. You then don't feel good about yourself. And then we have to start the process all over again. So writing letters is key. And then, Michelle, I've realized a really important insight around forgiveness, which is the key to but the deepest key to forgiveness beyond these letters, because that's clearing out old stuff in the past. The key to forgiveness is figuring out how to stop hurting yourself in the present, so today, and how to stop letting yourself get hurt. Because if you can stop hurting yourself today and stop letting yourself get hurt, that means you're not allowing anything more that you need to forgive other people for, and you're not creating more for you to forgive yourself for. So how do I stop hurting myself, and how do I stop letting myself get hurt? Well, it goes back to these four keys I was touching on, which is expressing yourself honestly and kindly, acting in integrity, and the other two that we didn't dive into, but I'm happy to if you want to after I share them with you, is everybody needs time and space for themselves every day, a little bit of time and space, and we can talk about what to do with that time and space. And then the fourth one is you need to understand precisely, not vaguely, how to take care of your mind, and you need to know how to do it every day. So when you do these four things, you stop hurting yourself and you stop letting yourself get hurt, which means you're not creating anything more to forgive other people for, and you're not creating anything more to forgive yourself for. And that's the key.
Well, I think that's definitely one of the takeaways today is people stop the bleed, right? You're stop the bleeding so that you can start to heal. If you're still
Yes.
bleeding, you continue to create this vicious cycle that people get in. So think about it. And once again, if you have questions, this is a great time to ask because we're just going to start to wrap up the show. But I think about toxicity, and I love that you said that. And I think about the Hoffman processes that I share about every show because it just so impacted my life. Is sometimes you got to take it all out. And writing will get stuff out of your cells. You write it. Sometimes you can box it out, get it out of your cells, and say, okay, here's everything in my cupboards. The dishes, the spices, the stuff in my fridge. Some are rancid. Some of them I never liked in the first place, and I'm saving it just in case. But I really don't want to eat as last resort. So how do you start to let go? And there's a toxicity in your diet. There's a toxicity in your mind. There's a toxicity in your heart. There's a toxicity in your space. And so I appreciate you saying that. I had not worded it that way before, but I love that you can start from today. Stop the bleed and then start to heal and forgive. Actually, I have this book and I shared it a little bit last week called Radical Forgiveness. It's the new book that somebody came in and said, I don't know about you, Blake, I do know about you because I can see your soul and your spirit, is that most likely you see something, you're like, you know what? There's thousands and millions of books out there, but that one's calling to me today. And I really believe people can forgive themselves. They'll start to take the steps to love themselves. So
100%.
wonderful wisdom there. We don't have time for many more questions, but I want to talk to you about purpose because I believe that sometimes people are fumbling around because they don't have a sense of purpose. And like you, I feel very blessed that I found my calling. Without a doubt, this is what I meant to do. It took me some drama and trauma to get here. And trust me, I've had to clean out my diet. I've had to clean out my heart. I've had to clean out my mind. That committee, I still have the committee up there. They chat to me. And sometimes I'm like, just, you know what, let me listen to a different podcast or dial into a book or dial into a song. I love the one that Liz said about from Jewel and the only thing that matters is kindness. But share with me, how do people find their purpose?
Well, thankfully, you don't have to go anywhere because you actually are your purpose. And you're talking to someone who spent every moment of every day for years and years, almost 2 decades, dissecting this concept. And for a long time, I thought my purpose was out in the world somewhere, and it was what I would do in the world or do with my life. And I later realized that that's really just the external manifestation of what is genuinely our purpose. And so for me, the clearest understanding of our purpose here on earth is that we come here to, one, enjoy being alive, ultimately to enjoy being in your body and enjoy being here having this experience, and to learn about love. And why? So we can bring healthy love onto the planet, bring healthy love into our home and into our environment and into our community. And so if our purpose is to enjoy being alive and to learn about love, how do we do that? Well, you have to master loving and valuing yourself, because that happens to be the key, the true key to health, happiness, and being able to love other people in a healthy way instead of loving people in a manipulative way or a conditional way or in a toxic way, which we all do throughout our life because we don't know better and we're learning as we go. And so a lot of times we think it has to be some grand gesture that we do in the world and then we get attention for it. And that actually is a symptom of still that belief system that we're not enough. And we think we have to be more, do more, and have more to fulfill our purpose in life. And that's actually not true. You being yourself, 100% yourself, you being 100% true to yourself, that is actually the healthiest manifestation of your purpose. And then if you're doing that, then like you, Michelle, you go and you do your work in the world, whatever you feel called to do. And that's how you make your living and that's how you make an impact. But beneath that, however it looks in the outer world, what you're really doing is you're enjoying your life because you're being 100% true to yourself and you're loving yourself so that you can be the loving best version of yourself for your clients, for yourself, and for the people around you. Right. So for me, it was helpful to dissect that and get really clear about it.
Well, I think you did a great job explaining that. So, Blake, we've celebrated you. You've given us great guidance. We learned how to connect with you on your website, unconditional-selflove.com. And you provided some hope. And that, if we all just realize we don't have to go anywhere in this moment, how do we start to clear out the doubt? You are worthy. To everybody listening today, you are enough. And whoa. So the word that when I did study a little bit about what to talk about, and the word that really came to me is suffering. And we used to call our clients patients, and now we don't call them patients because that means one who suffers. I see a lot of people who aren't suffering, and they come and share their journey with us at Your Wellness Connection so they could minimize whatever little sufferings that they get, the barnacles they get throughout life by just walking through right now. So, Blake, thanks for joining me on Small Changes, Big Shifts.
Thank you so much for having me.
I got two final questions for you. If you had a magic wand, I think I know the answer to this right now, but let's see. If you could change the world, what would you do?
I would teach every child in the first 10 years of their life exactly how to love and value themselves.
I'm with you on that. That's one reason why we have the Big Shifts Foundation, really helping kids value. And it's not, like I said, I get that once people will eat the right things once they love themselves. So I'm glad you brought that up. All right. I actually have two more questions. I got one. What is your medicine? What is your medicine for the world that you share with the world? I believe everybody has their medicine. What's your medicine you share with the world?
You mean in terms of my work?
Yeah.
Well, for me, again, it's as a human and as a man, never learning how to love and value myself. I just share kind of my no BS, very practical, real, how I do it every day and how all the things I had to study and struggle through and learn through to get to this clear understanding. So for me, it is, how do you actually love yourself? No BS, no excess, just very real. And then I thought at first your question was, what is my medicine in terms of like what soothes my soul? One of them is coffee. I love just sitting outside and having coffee and just like watching the world go around and being with my thoughts and breathing fresh air. That's one thing I love about being on this planet.
Well, that's great. No one's turned that around. So final question. What's a quote? I'm a little bit of a quote nerd. What's a quote that you like to share with the world?
Can I read it to you?
Of course.
Okay.
You can read it.
Actually, it's very appropriate. It's ironic that you brought this up. It's one of my favorites. And this is from Viktor Frankl and from his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And for those of you who don't know who Viktor Frankl was, he was a psychiatrist that was incarcerated in the concentration camps during the Nazi regime. And he wrote, "For the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it is set into song by so many poets, proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers. The truth that love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man and women is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, in the contemplation of his beloved. In a position of utter desolation, when man cannot express himself in positive action, when his only achievement may consist in enduring his sufferings in the right way, an honorable way, in such a position man can, through loving contemplation of the image he carries of his beloved, achieve fulfillment. For the first time in my life, I was able to understand the meaning of the words, 'The angels are lost in perpetual contemplation of an infinite glory.'"
That's powerful. Well, to all of our listeners out there today, whether you're listening to this through the podcast or you're watching it live on Facebook, I hope that you will do something you love today and that you'll find connection back to your own heart and love. And the quote that I have for today, and it'll lead me to wrapping up the show. And if you found something beneficial in the show, I'd be so grateful if you'd consider sharing it. People have a hard time. Here's my quote. People have a hard time of letting go of their suffering out of fear of the unknown. They prefer suffering that is familiar. That's from Thich Nhat Hanh. And so I encourage you that on the other side of suffering, I've been there. I've suffered. I felt lost. I felt that I didn't matter. I felt the self-doubt. And like I said, I still feel some of those things. They just don't last days and weeks anymore. They're moments. And I've learned how to shift those moments. Trust me, on the other side of your suffering is love. So take a risk. Maybe write that forgiveness letter and get all the grumbling out, get all the toxicity out, and then rewrite it. Now's the time. We are in major transformation. If you are not feeling called to a different level of vibration right now, please wake up. Our world is demanding it right now. Our kids are demanding it. So find ways to love yourself. I'd love to hear from you. Go out and make it a great day. Go out and get this. I don't know where you're at, Blake, but in Kansas City, it's a gorgeous day today. Maybe go out and go for a walk, tune into another podcast, tune into your favorite tunes, call a friend. I'm sending you lots of love. Have a wonderful day. Blessings to all of you. I sure appreciate you listening to Small Changes, Big Shifts. If you go to the website, smallchangesbigshifts.com, we'll have the show notes ready for you there. If this episode inspired you to make a small change that will lead to a big shift, please share with a friend. You can catch our episode on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and our website. And if you feel like it, please leave a rating or a comment. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch our episode next week. Blessings to you.